We'll conclude at verse 12. When you have it, say amen.
Amen.
And it reads, Then the Pharisees and Sadducees came and testing him, asked that he would show them a sign from heaven. He answered and said to them, When it is evening, you say, it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning, it will be foul weather today, for the sky is red and threatening. Hypocrites, you know how to discern the face of the sky, but cannot discern the signs of the times. A wicked and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and no sign shall be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. And he left them and departed. Now when his disciples had come to the other side, they had forgotten to take bread. Then Jesus said to them, Take heed and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Then they reasoned among themselves, saying, It is because we have taken no bread. But Jesus, being aware of it, said to them, O you of little faith, why do you reason among yourselves because you have brought no bread? Do you not yet understand or remember the 5 loaves of the 5,000 and how many baskets you took up, nor the 7 loaves of the 4,000 and how many large baskets you took up? How is it you do not understand that I did not speak to you concerning bread, but beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees? Then they understood that he did not tell them to beware of the leaven of bread, but of the doctrine of the Pharisees and Sadducees. I'd like to work today with a caption, Pop Quiz. Pop quiz. You may be seated. I love me some HBCUs. There is nothing like going to a historically black college or university. It's something of an experience in and of its own. I agree with Tom Joyner, who's a huge fan of HBCUs. He encourages all young students to attend HBCUs. And he says for good reason. He says because you're more apt to succeed at places where they believe you can. I believe that's so true. I had the privilege of attending the best HBCU in the state of Texas. Texas Southern University. That's right. It's the second largest HBCU in the nation. And I had the privilege of attending TSU. Most people who've attended HBCUs have good experiences. Then those who don't probably went to PV, but they're still, for the most part, of great HBCUs. My Texas Southern University experience was one of a kind. If you went to an HBCU, you enjoy the campus, the atmosphere, the bands, the games, the rallies, all of that. But one underrated part of HBCUs are the professors. I tell you, I've been to plenty schools, and something has always stood out about my professors at Texas Southern University. I'll tell you one professor who's my greatest professor that I've ever taken. His name is Dr. Freeman. If you know anything about Dr. Freeman, he's more known for his reputation with Texas Southern's debate team. how he has molded them into one of the best, not in Texas, not in the United States, but in the world. Why Texas Southern debate team, they go to Russia, to China, to Italy, to Taiwan, and they would bring back first place at these debate tournaments. So when I heard of the chance to take Dr. Freeman's class, I jumped at the opportunity. But did you know one thing? Dr. Freeman had a reputation for being a grand professor. Matter of fact, when the movie The Great Debaters, who also wanted to teach their cast how to debate, is starring the greatest actor of all time, Denzel Washington, they sent the entire cast to come to Texas to learn under Dr. Freeman. Wow. Did you all know something else about Dr. Freeman? His reputation for debate was true, but he also had a reputation for being mean. I remember even registering for his class. When I went to register for Dr. Freeman's class, the young lady at the registrar's office said, "Why do you want to take his class?" She said, "All he's going to do is yell at you the whole time and give you a C at the end." And I said, shoot, I want to take him now even more. So I registered for Dr. Freeman's class, and can I tell you, it was the real deal. But Dr. Freeman was old school. He was not just old, but I'll give you an example of how old he was. Did you know that one of his students, when he was in Georgia, was a young man by the name of Martin Luther King? He was one of his students, so that's how old Dr. Freeman was. Dr. Freeman had certain rules. One of his rules was you did not come into his class after he did. His class started at 8 a.m. and once he arrived, no one else was allowed to enter in his classroom. I remember one time specifically where he and a young lady got to the door at the exact same time. And she, being polite, was a gentleman and respected her elders. She allowed him to walk in first. And as soon as he walked in the classroom, you know what he did? He did an about face and looked at her like she had lost her mind. And she had to turn around and walk right out the door. Wow. Dr. Freeman had another rule. His rule was that you did not bring any type of cell phone in the classroom at all. He felt that cell phones disrupted the learning process, and he did not say power them off, put them on vibrate. He said, don't bring them in the classroom. Leave it at your home, in your car, in your dorm, but do not bring it in the classroom. And if he saw it in the classroom, you had to leave. Not if it rung. If he saw it in the classroom, you had to leave. Needless to say, I've seen a few people had to get up and leave just by it happened to come out on the desk. He was old school. He was strict. And you know what else he would do? He would yell at you. If you were not getting it like you were supposed to be, getting it and following along with the reading, say for example, he would lecture for the most part, but you still had to keep up with the reading. And while he was lecturing, if he asked you a question and you did not get the right answer, he would yell. And then if you started to open your book and try to find it in your book, you know what he would say? You won't find it there. You won't find it there. You won't find it there. Dr. Freeman, and if he got so frustrated, you know what he would do? He would say, clear your desk. Take out one sheet of paper. And we knew at that moment it was time for a pop quiz. That we had angered our professor so much by getting all these wrong answers that he now had enough and would say, take out your desk, clear your tables, take out a sheet of paper. It's time for a pop quiz. Did you know that there exists a pop quiz in Mathew chapter 16? Jesus, after repeatedly giving one lesson to his disciples and they could not, would not bring themselves to comprehend what Jesus was saying. So Jesus had to give them the first century pop quiz in Matthew chapter 16. Our story starts off with a very unique group coming together. It starts with the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And it tells us in verse 1 that they came together tempting our Lord, asking Jesus, show us a sign. Give us a sign. Not just any sign, but give us a sign from heaven. And Jesus had an interesting remark and reply to them. He told them two things. The first, he told them, you yourselves, when you look up at the sky, you see that the sky is red, and you say it's going to be good weather today. But then you see at evening time when the sky is red and threatening, can say it's going to be bad weather tomorrow. Jesus told them, you can look up at the sky and discern the signs in the sky, but you miss the signs right in front of your face. Haven't you met people like that who know all the things about the world and technology, but the things of God that just go right over their head? They cannot see God working right in front of their very eyes. And Jesus tells them, you hypocrites, you can look up and see the signs in the sky, but you miss the signs standing right in front of your face. He tells this to the Pharisees and Sadducees, but then he also tells them one other thing. A wicked and adulterous generation seeks after a sign. A wicked generation. Wicked, evil, sinful. How dare you, supposed to be God's children, those in covenant relationship with God, Pharisees and Sadducees, and you being the creation will look to your creator and say, give us a sign. Not for nothing danger, not because you were sick or in need, but just because your religious curiosity, you will look to God and say, convince me, prove who you are, that you are. Give us a sign from heaven. It's wickedness. How dare creation tell God to prove himself? We know that God is never in the business of proving himself. From Genesis 1, it begins with, in the beginning, God. No biography, no resume, no list of achievements. It just tells us that God created the heavens and the earth. He does not prove himself at all. And even through Exodus chapter 3, that's the closest we ever get to God proving himself. When Moses is talking with God and they ask God, Moses says, whom shall I tell them sent me, in case they ask who sent me? And this is the close that we get to God explaining himself. He says, tell those Egyptians and those Israelites, when they ask who sent you, tell them I am that I am sent you. That's the closest God gets to proving himself. He simply says, I am whatever it is I am. God doesn't prove himself at all. But he also says an adulterous generation seeks after a sign. Adulterous? That word is used when it comes down to marriage. That type of generation seeks after a sign. He says those are the ones that seek after a sign. Those who move their betrothed, who are in wedded bliss with one thing, but yet seeks after another thing and keeps going and going and going. And that's how you are when you are the people of God and you sit back and say, God needs to show us a sign. I can think of our generation who keeps moving from one thing to another thing, quenching their spiritual fix when God is there all alone. Have you ever met folk like that who are always on some new spiritual kick, some new spiritual high, always moving to something new to quench this. Yeah, it filled me for this need. Now I'm this for that need. Now I'm that for this. When God says, stand still, I'm God all alone. Quit being an adulterous generation. You don't have to keep seeking answers from here or from there. God has been right there constantly all along. An adulterous generation seeks after a sign. And then if you would keep reading, Jesus has a lesson for them. After he condemns the Sadducees and the Pharisees, Jesus gives a lesson to his disciples. It's in verse 6. It says simply this: beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Easy lesson, right? Simple. You notice that Jesus talks about both. The beware of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Now, I know you might not be an expert in first century history, but the Pharisees and the Sadducees were the two most dominant parties of the day. Kind of odd, right? We don't know nothing about having two dominant parties of the day. But there was the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Now, the Sadducees were the elite class, the wealthy. They were not big in number. They were looked at as the conservatives because they believed that God only spoke through the books of Moses. They believed that God spoke in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, and that's it. They did not believe in the rest of the writings. They didn't believe in the prophets, the major prophets, the minor prophets. They were your wealthy class. They controlled the political landscape. They were much in bed with the Romans. They didn't believe in prophets. They didn't believe in the resurrection. They didn't believe in spirits or angels. These were your Sadducees of the day. And this group was known as the conservatives of the day. They controlled the political status quo in first century Israel. But then came the Pharisees. And did you not know, most scholars would posit today that Jesus has so much more in common with the Pharisees. The Pharisees believed in all the books of the Old Testament. They believed in angels. They believed in the resurrection of the dead. They even believed that God would send a coming Messiah who would save his people. The Pharisees were the majority group of the day. If you walk through Israel, majority of the people in that community were mainly Pharisees. And Jesus would say to both of them, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Now, as we're describing both, I know the tendency for Christianity nowadays is to choose a side. To say, I'm more of a Pharisee. I'm more of a Sadducee. But bear in mind that Jesus would say, even to the Sadducees who did not believe that he was a prophet, nor in the resurrection, that Jesus could not side with the Sadducees because they didn't believe in the resurrection. And you cannot believe anything that Jesus said if you don't believe in the resurrection. And then came the Pharisees, the ones who you say they line most up with Jesus theologically. But Jesus would say to the Pharisees in Matthew 23, you hypocrites, you bind the kingdom of God from men, but you yourselves will not enter into it. Jesus condemned the Sadducees and the Pharisees. So before you pick a side, remember one thing. Jesus hardly fit neatly into any dominant group. I still can't find a group where Jesus fits in neatly with either group. whether Pharisees or Sadducees, Jesus tells them, beware of the leaven of both of them. And that was the only lesson. Verse 6, beware the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees. And you would think that it was an easy lesson to learn. But I hear what you're saying. Brother, get to the point. We didn't come here to hear about these empirical seeking after signs. We didn't come here and you're going off on a tangent about binary political systems and structures. But get to the point. I'm glad you said that because the disciples came out with the point. The disciples said the point of that entire lesson is not binary political system or seeking God through empirical means. The point of that entire lesson is simply, we forgot to bring bread. After his disciples heard his one-point lesson of beware of the leaven, they got together, they huddled. They used the Greek word where we get dialogue from. They got together, huddled, and dialogue, and they reasoned among themselves that Jesus is only telling us this because we forgot to bring bread with us. And as they're dialoguing, Jesus overhears them discussing this. And Jesus in verse 7 peeps, he eardrops and catches on to what they're saying. And Jesus has to say to them, oh, you of little faith. How is it that you sit here, right here in dialogue amongst yourselves, reason amongst yourselves about not having any bread? Jesus uses a Greek word. Our translations, sometimes I love our English translations, and sometimes it just don't do enough justice. This is one of those times where it just doesn't seem to do enough justice. The original New Testament was written in Greek, and our translations translated into, "O ye of little faith." But you know, Jesus really used one word to say that, "O ye of little faith." It's a big word. It's oligopistois. Oligopistois. It's a conjunction word. Oligo means little, pistois meaning faith. How are you still oligopistois? Little faiths. Little faiths. How are you still baby faiths? Baby faiths. Oligopistois. It's one word. It's more like an adjective that he's used to describe who they are. How is it that you are still oligopistois? You are still baby faiths? Yeah. Still baby faiths. All throughout the entire Gospels, Jesus is trying to elevate the disciples to live at a higher plane of existence, to understand God on a better level, on a more accurate level, but they seem to never simply get it. Jesus told them in Matthew 6, take no thought for what you eat or for what you drink or what you should wear, because isn't life so much more than what you eat and what you drink and what you wear? Jesus told them this in Matthew chapter 6, and then he's trying to get them to elevate their minds, and he uses that word again in Matthew 6, oligopistois, little faiths. God is so much more than the clothes that you wear and the food that you put in your belly. But then they still didn't get it then. But then he had to tell them even more. Consider the lilies of the field. The grass that's here today and tomorrow thrown into the oven. Not even Solomon was arranged so beautiful as these simple flowers. And if God takes care of these flowers, don't you think that your God will take care of you? That God knows what you need before you even ask him. But they still could not get it because they still stuck at that baby faith level, thinking that God can't handle them without their bread. But then Jesus had told them in Matthew chapter 10, he says, are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? And not one of them will fall to a ground without your heavenly Father knowing it. And if God pays that much attention to 2 birds sold for a penny, how much more than sparrows are you worth? Aren't you worth more than sparrows? That if he keeps his eye on the sparrow, then somehow we ought to know that God watches over us.
Yeah.
He keeps his eye on the sparrow, then I know that God watches over me. The disciples could not wrap their minds around it, and after they repeatedly got wrong answer after wrong answer, Jesus had to say, clear your desk, take out 1 sheet of paper. I don't want to hear nothing else. It's time for a pop quiz. Pop quiz, question number 1. Don't you remember when there were 5 loaves for the 5,000? And if Jesus fed those 5,000 people, don't you think he can take care of you? And then he asked them, how many basketfuls did you pick up from the 5 loaves of the 5,000? The answer was 7. They picked up 12 baskets for the 5,000. Question number 3. Don't you remember the 7 loaves with the 4,000? And if Jesus fed 4,000 people, don't you think he'll take care of you? And he fed 4,000 people. How many baskets full did you pick up? And the answer was 7. And after all of that, after Jesus has fed 5,000 here and 4,000 here, why do you think in your mind that he wouldn't have enough to feed 12 disciples here? How dare you still have this baby faith, this little faith? Think of God on a small level, so worried about your next problem and situation. Don't you know who your heavenly Father is? That God knows what you need before you even need it. I'm just talking about the disciples now, but fine, your turn. After all of what God has done for you in your life, to you in your life, that God has kept you in your own being, that you would think that God would leave you right now, that you would have another situation that God wouldn't be able to take care of you through. How dare you have this baby faith to get down to the end of the year and think that God would leave you somehow in 2019. I hear it even in with our own generation. And when they talk as if they've lost all hope, as if things are as worse than they ever been. They start saying things like, there ain't no way that we're going to get out of this. There ain't no way we can make it. And then they even start feeling down and depressed and low when they start talking about the White House. And I just say, man, come on now. That's what I love hearing from old folk. Some folk who've been around a few things, who've seen a few more moons than we have. And they ain't not pulling their hair around Donald Trump no more. Because they know they done been through the Reagan, they done been through Nixon, they done been through Bushes, they done been through Clintons, they done been through Carters. So why am I pulling my hair out over Donald Trump? Same God who took care of us back then is the same God who will take care of you right now. And if he did it before, newsflash, he can do it again. How dare you walk around with this many faith as if you don't know how you gonna make it? God has fed 5,000 before, 4,000 again. He can feed your life and your family glory? Has he made a way for anybody here? This is my own pop quiz. Has God opened doors for you? Has he ever been bread when you was hungry? Has he ever been water when you were thirsty? Has he ever been a friend when others walked away? Has he ever dried your tears? Has he ever made a way for you? Has he ever opened doors when other doors were shut in your face? How dare you walk around like you ain't gonna make it?